Hello everyone. Today I am here again with the second part of chapter Bhakti Sufi Tradition, class 12th History. In the previous chapter we talk about Bhakti, the sources to understand Bhakti tradition, and about Tantric practices, Puranic traditions, Vedic traditions, Nainas and Alvars, that means devotee of Vishnu and devotee of Shiva. Then we talk about Vishavas. Then we talk about the arrival of Islam into India. Then the growth of Sufism. In this chapter, we'll continue with the Chishti's tradition in the subcontinent. The Chishti, one of the group of Sufis who migrated to India in the late 12th century, they were the most influential because they adapted successfully to the local environment and adopt several features of Indian devotional traditions. The Kwankhwa was the center of social life. It comprises several small rooms and a big hall where the inmates and visitors lived and prayed. The inmates, including family members of the Sheikh, his attendants, and disciples. The Sheikh lived in a small room on the roof of the hall where he met visitors in the morning and evening. Sufi or Wali or friend of the god who claimed proximity to Allah acquired God's grace to perform miracles. There was an open kitchen, langar, run on unasked charity. From morning till late night, people from all walks of life, soldiers, slave, singers, merchant, poet, travelers, rich and poor, Hindu, yogis, and kalandars, came seeking discipleship, amulets for healing. Practices that were adopted including bowing before the sheikh, offering water in visitors, shaving the head of initiate, and yogic exercises represented attempt to assimilate local traditions. Sheikh Nizamuddin appointed several spiritual successors and deputed them to set up hospices in various parts of the subcontinent. As a result, the teaching, practices, and organization of the Chishtis as well as the fame of the Sheikh were spread rapidly. Now, ziyarat, that means pilgrimage. Pilgrimage called ziyarat to tomb of Sufi saint is prevalent all over the Muslim world. This practice is an occasion for seeking the Sufi spiritual grace. For more than 7 centuries, people of various creed, classes, and social backgrounds have expressed their devotion at the dargah of the five great Chishti saints. Amongst these, the most revered shrine is that of Khwaja Muhyiddin Chishti, popularly known as Garib Nawaz. But the earliest construction to house the tomb was funded in the late 15th century by Sultan Ghayasuddin Khilji of Malwa. Since the shrine was located on the trade route linking Delhi and Gujarat, it attracted lots of travelers. The earliest textual reference of Khwaja Muhyiddin Dargah date to the 14th century. It was eventually popular because of the austerity and pity of its sake. the greatness of his spiritual successors, and the patronage of royal visitors. Muhammad bin Tughlaq was the first sultan to visit this shrine. Akbar visited the tomb 14 times, sometimes 2 or 3 times a year, to seek blessings for new conquest, fulfillment of vows, and the birth of sons. He offered a huge cauldron to facilitate cooking for pilgrims. He also had a mosque constructed within the compound of the Dargah. Qawwali. Qawwali was also a part of Ziyarat. The use of music and dance, including mystical chants performed by specially trained musicians or qawwal to evoke divine ecstasy. The Sufis remember God either by reciting the divine name or evoking his presence through sama or performing a performance of mystical music called Qawwali. Amir Khusro, the great poet, musician, and disciple of Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia, gave a unique form of Chishti Sama by introducing the call, a hymn sung at the opening or closing of Qawwali. This was followed by Sufi poetry in Persian, Hindavi, or Urdu, and sometimes using words from all of these languages. Qawwals, those who sing these songs at the shrine of Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia, always started their recital with the call. Today, Qawwali is performed in shrine all over the subcontinent. Language and communication in Chishti tradition. In Delhi, those associated with the Chishti Silsila conversed in Hindavi, the language of people. Other Sufis, such as Baba Farid, composed verses in the local languages. Yet another composed long poem or masnavi to express ideas of divine love using human love as an allegory. For example, the Prem Akhyan love story Padmavat, composed by Malik Muhammad Jaisi, revolved around the romance of Padmini and Ratan Sen, the king of Chittor. A different genre of Sufi poetry was composed in and around the town of Bijapur, Karnataka. The very short poem in Urdu attributed to Chishti Sufi who lived in the region during the 17th and 18th century. These poems were probably sung by women while performing household chores like grinding grain and spinning. Other compositions were in the form of lurinama and shadinama or wedding songs. It is likely that the Sufis of this region were inspired by the pre-existing bhakti tradition of the Kannada Vachana of the Lingayats and the Marathi Abhanga of the Saint of Pandharpur. It is throughout this medium that Islam gradually gained a place in the village of Deccan. Sufis and their relation with the state, that means rulers. The Sufi accepted unsolicited grant and donations from the political elites. The Sultan, in turn, set up charitable trusts as endowments for hospice and granted tax-free. The Chistis accepted donation in cash and kind. Rather than accumulate donations, they prefer to use these full on immediate requirements such as food, clothes, living quarters, and ritual necessities. All this enhanced the moral authority of the Sheikh, which in turn attract people from all walks of life. Further, their piety and scholarship and people's belief in their miraculous power made Sufi popular among the masses, whose supports king wishes to secure. Kings did not simply need to demonstrate their association with Sufis, they also required legitimation from them. When the Turks set up Delhi Sultanate, they anticipated opposition from ulema for not imposing Sharia as the state law. The Sultan then sought out the Sufi who derived their authority directly from God and did not depend on jurists to interpret the Sharia. Because, beside, it was believed that the Aulia could intercede with God in order to improve the material and spiritual conditions of ordinary human beings. That is why king often wanted their tomb to be in the vicinity of Sufi shrine or hospice. However, there were instances of conflict between the Sultan and the Sufis. To assert their authority, both expected that certain rituals be performed, such as prostration and kissing of the feet. Occasionally, the Sufi sheikh was addressed with sounding titles like Sultan ul Mashaykh. Now we talk about the Kabir and his life and his teachings. Kabir was born in Hindu family, Kabir Das, but was raised by a poor Muslim family belonging to the community of weavers or Julaha who were relatively recently converted to Islam. They also suggested that he was initiated into bhakti by a guru, perhaps Ramanand. Kabir was one of the most outstanding example of a poet saint who emerged in North India. Verses ascribed to Kabir have been compiled in three distinct but overlapping traditions. The Kabir Bijak is preserved by the Kabir Panth in Varanasi and in Uttar Pradesh. The Kabir Granthavali associated with the Dadu Panth in Rajasthan, and many of his compositions are found in the Adi Granth Sahib. Kabir's poems have survived in several languages and dialects, and some of composed in the special languages of Nirguna poet, the Santabhasha, other known as Uldabasi, upside down saying, are written in a form of which everyday meanings are inverted. Kabir's mystical experiences are many to describe the ultimate reality. These included Islam. He described the ultimate reality as Allah, Khuda, Hazrat, and Peer. He also used terms drawn from Vedantic tradition, Alak, Nirankar, Brahman, Atman, etc. Other terms with mystical connotations such as Shabad or Sunya were drawn from yogic traditions. Diverse and sometimes conflicting ideas are expressed in these poems. Some poems draw on Islamic ideas and use monotheism and iconoclasm to attack Hindu polytheism and idol worship. Others use the Sufi concept of love to express the Hindu practice of Nam Simran, that means remembrance of God's name. Scholars have tried to analyze the language, style, and content to establish which verses could be Kabir's. What this rich corpus of verses also signifies is that Kabir was and it is to the present a source of inspiration for those who question entrenched religious and social institutions, ideas, and practices in their search for the divine. However, the verses attributes to Kabir use the word Guru and Sadguru, but do not mention the name of any specific preceptors. Historians have pointed out that it is very difficult to establish that Ramanand and Kabir were contemporary without assigning improbably long lives to either or both. Baba Guru Nanak. In this, we talk about the life and teaching of Baba Guru Nanak. Baba Guru Nanak was born in a Hindu merchant family in a village called Nankan Sahib near the river Ravi in the predominantly Muslim Punjab, now in Pakistan. He trained to be an accountant and studied Persian. He was married at a young age, but he spent most of his time among Sufi and Bhaktas. He also traveled widely. The message of Baba Guru Nanak is spelt out in his hymns and teaching. Had he advocated a form of Nirgun Bhakti, he firmly repudiated the external practices of the religion he was around him. He rejected sacrifices, ritual bath, images, worship, and the scripture of both Hindu and Muslim. For Baba Guru Nanak, the absolute or Rab had no gender or form. He proposed a simple way to connect to the divine by remembering and repeating the divine name. Expressing his ideas through the hymns called Shabad in Punjabi, Baba Guru Nanak would sing these compositions in various ragas, while his attendant Mardana played the rabab. Baba Guru Nanak organized his followers into a community. He set up rules for congregational worship, Sangat, involving collective recitation. He appointed one of his disciples, Angat, to succeed him as the preceptor, Guru, that means, and this practice was followed for nearly 200 years. It appears that Baba Guru Nanak did not wish to establish a new religion. But after his death, his followers consolidated their own practices and distinguished themselves from both Hindu and Muslims. The fifth preceptor, Guru Arjan, compiled Baba Guru Nanak's hymns along with those of his four successors and other religious poets like Baba Farid, Ravi Das, and Kabir in the Adi Granth Sahib. These hymns, called Guru Bani, are composed in various languages. In the late 17th century, the 10th preceptor Guru Govind Singh included the compositions of the ninth Guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur, and this scripture was called the Guru Granth Sahib. Guru Govind Singh also led the foundation of the Khalsa Panth, that means Army of the Pure, and defined its five symbols: uncut hair, a dagger, a pair of shorts, a combat, a steel bangle. Under him, the community got consolidated as a social, religious, and military force. Now we talk about Mirabai. She was a devotee princess. Mirabai is perhaps the best known woman poet within the Bhakti tradition. Biographies have been constructed primarily from the bhajan attributed to her, which were transmitted orally for centuries. According to the tradition, she was Rajput princess from Marwar who was married against her wishes to a prince of Mewar in Rajasthan. She defied her husband and did not submit to the traditional role of wife and mother, instead recognizing Krishna, the avatar of Vishnu, as her lover. Her in-laws tried to poison her, but she escaped from the palace to live as a wandering singer, composing songs that are characterized by intense expression of emotion. According to some traditions, her preceptor was Ravidas, a leather worker. This would indicate her defiance of the norms of caste society. After rejecting the comforts of her husband's palace, she is supposed to have donned the white robes of a widow or the saffron robe of the renouncers. Although Mirabai did not attract a sect or group of followers, she had been recognized as a source of inspiration for centuries. Her songs continue to be sung by the women and men, especially those who are poor and considered low caste in Gujarat and Rajasthan. So, at last, The devotional worship of God with ultimate objects of attaining moksha, that means salvation, is called bhakti. The word bhakti was derived from the root word bhaj, meaning to adore. The impact of bhakti movement on the Indian society was significant and far-reaching. Virtually all these religious traditions continue to flourish to date. This continuity has certain advantages for historians as it allows them to compare contemporary practices with those described in textual traditions or shown in old paintings and to trace changes. So, here are some questions for you. With the help of these presentations, you can complete these questions. My first question is: discuss the major belief and practices that characterize Sufism. The next question is: examine how and why rulers tried to establish connection with the tradition of the Nainas and the Sufis. Then you can write the major teachings of Kabir, Baba Guru Nanak, and Mirabai. Hope you like this presentation. Thank you.